Okay, it's exactly 2 o'clock here in the UK, so we'd like to get started with our session today. So, morning everybody, I'm Dermott and I'd like to welcome you to our education special webinar, and we're very pleased to welcome two special guest speakers from the University of Southampton today to share their experience and practical examples of using Me Too in their classes. So first of all, I'd like to introduce James Wilson. James is an award-winning lecturer and a leading national practitioner of innovative use of interactive theatre within learning and teaching environments. Although broadly mental health focused, James's clinical specialist areas include dementia and managing aggression. Our second guest speaker is Trevor Kettle, who is a lecturer in mental health and faculty lead for patient and public involvement. Trevor's expertise covers all aspects of mental health practice and includes pre- and post-registration nurse programs, technology-enhanced learning and self-management of long-term mental health conditions. And both speakers have been using interactive technology systems for over 10 years, from clickers and hardware to software in more recent years. So before I hand over to James, I just wanted to encourage you all to join in via Me Too and to hopefully get the most out of this webinar. And James and Trevor will be asking a few questions via the live polling, and as will I towards the end for some feedback. So again, I've got the instructions up on screen, so hopefully you will all participate in the polling and also ask some questions of our speakers today. So please access Me Too either by downloading the app via the iOS or Android app stores, so search Me Too, that's 2 E's and 2 O's, or you can access via the web app, which is web.metoo.io, and then enter our all-important meeting ID, which is 189900826. So as I said, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to ask some questions of your peers, and we can do this through the Q&A board on Me Too, and at the end of the session we will be going through those questions as part of a Q&A session. If you agree or like anybody else's comments, please use the board to actually like those. That will help us prioritise those questions. If we do have too many to get through at the end during the Q&A session, the chaps have promised to respond to all those questions, and we will push those out to you all post-event. So to get us warmed up, I'd like to ask a couple of polls. So first of all, just like to find out what best describes your role. So if you look at Me Too now, are you a lecturer or teacher, learning technologist or part of IT in an educational environment? Are you a librarian, a researcher, a student, or are you a business professional? Or is it something else that we haven't listed here? And if there is something else, please feel free to push it into the Q&A board so we can have it for our records. So it'll be really interesting to see what the spread is like over this session. And I can see we've got a few votes coming in now. So I'll give that a couple more seconds before I close it off. And we'll take that there. So thanks very much for responding to that. Let's have a little look. Okay, so the vast majority are lecturers and teachers, and a few LTs, a few business professionals. So a reasonable split. Obviously not as much as we anticipated, but it's great to see so many lecturers here today. So I'm sure you'll all have lots to take away from the session. And then just one last one for me. Where did you hear about today's webinar? So was it an email directly from us? Did somebody share the email with you? Was it via social media? The ALT newsletter? Obviously we were at ALT last week. Was it a colleague recommendation, or again was there something else? And I'll just give you a couple of seconds to push those in. It's great to see we've got a few more people joining in Me Too here. Hopefully you'll all get involved. Not everybody voting at the moment, but hopefully you'll all be here to ask a question of our speakers. Okay, we'll close that now, and this will be interesting for our marketing team to see what was most successful. So actually I'm really pleased to see so many colleague recommendations. That's really nice to see, as well as obviously the success of the email campaign. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to pass over to James and Trevor, who will take you through the session.
So good afternoon everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all, and thanks for joining us today. On behalf of Trevor and myself, we're looking forward to chatting about the use of interactive theatre in the classroom with Me Too, and also Me Too with Skype. And I think if anybody would like to find out more about any of the work that we have done with any of these particular techniques, then our email addresses are there, and I've you could probably Google us as well. But if we could go on to the next slide, Dermott. So I just wanted to just briefly tell you a little bit about us. And back in 2004, myself and Trevor began our journey of working with interactive theatres techniques. And really the reason for this was to try and make a classroom experience really come alive, because again, trying to sort of get a lot of communication messages in a nursing education program was really always a challenge. So in 2004 we really started with the first of our techniques there, which we've listed a couple of them, forum theatre. Through the years we've just added to the repertoire using things like invisible theatre, playback theatre, clickers theatre, which is our own innovation, and certainly some more. So we've kind of bracketed it and used the umbrella term, as it were, of interactive theatre. And you can see there as well, our general aim, albeit very broad, is to provide that classroom experience, because at the end of the day, nursing is really dynamic. And what we've found is that in order to sort of put a living model to a student nurse audience in the classroom, and the idea is so that they can interact with it, we've been able to sort of, you know, carry a lot of huge potential with these techniques, because again what students are able to do is observe and also feel the emotional effects of certainly how the actors are able to make them feel, which of course in something as dynamic and complex as, you know, healthcare, this is something which is really important for us to explore. And certainly, you know, as much as PowerPoint is the tool of choice for many people, we like to try and sort of mix it up a little bit. Trevor, have you got anything?
No, I think that's absolutely clear. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, Dermott. So it's a bit of a busy slide, but one of the things that I really wanted to chat to you all today about was the construction, the architecture of one of our Me Too interactive theatre sessions. And so really what it was about, just to start off with the sort of aim and overview, the aim itself, the session, was to explore the sort of assessing individual needs with people who have long-term sort of enduring healthcare conditions. And certainly in order to do this, we combined a live theatrical experience, live story, a theatrical story, with the branching storyline of Me Too. So we'll just talk a little bit about the preparation of that. Certainly the first thing that you need to be doing is preparing a story. And as I believe Adam Warren has in the past in Me Too, these webinars, has talked about branching storylines. One of the things that I've certainly done is written a story, which many of us may or may not remember as the choose your own adventure types of stories from yesteryear, like the fighting fantasy books that offer you choices of where to go next. So that has been one way in which we've prepared these sorts of sessions in order to look at things like clinical decision making, to help students understand the sort of, you know, the consequences of poorly thought through clinical decisions. Certainly in preparing any sort of session, the staff are required to undertake rehearsals, because we never ever walk into a classroom without doing some form of rehearsal. Improvisation is one thing, but certainly sticking to a very close-knit storyline is equally key. For this, for this particular session that I'm talking to you today about, we had 5 actors, included our community matron, a student nurse, Mr. and Mrs. Smart, who were our patients, and their daughter. Similar to this, we also prepare our students. First of all, we gave a referral letter which talked about what the conditions that they would see. So with this we had Mr. Smart, Mr. Ken Smart, who had mostly sort of mental health conditions. In this particular case it was dementia. And with Mrs. Smart, we actually had physical conditions with our character, and that included things like arthritis and the effects of a fall. And also as well, certainly for student pre-reading, we also gave information about the session and what they can expect. So the use of Me Too and also the interactive nature of it. And I think that's also key before using particular technology that they have never actually come across before. And we're just going to talk about this bit near the end, but I should just mention that our audience was 350 student nurses on this particular occasion. The session and the questions. So we had 4 particular scenes that we covered in what was over 2 hours of a session. Now you can see there scene 1 and the types of Me Too questions that we actually used. But just to give that context, the scene started with our 2 main actors, which was a community matron and a student nurse, before going into Meet Mr. and Mrs. Smart. So in this particular case we had the matron questioning the student nurse about their knowledge. And this would include things like, what is stress, incontinence, and that would be a straight knowledge question, straight open to the audience to test their knowledge, as if they were answering the question on behalf of the student nurse in the car before going into the house. You can see there as well we used a sort of a confidence-based question, and that was the question about, so have you undertaken an assessment, and do you feel confident to undertake a continence assessment? And that's really useful as well, particularly with 350 students, to actually get an idea of where they self-assess themselves in relation to their own confidence levels of clinical skills. We then move on to scene 2, which is when our student and community matron enter into the house to meet Mr. and Mrs. Smart. And there's a cracking scene. I should also have said earlier that my colleague here today plays Mr. Smart, who is the chap in this case who has the effects of dementia.
Mid-70s.
His mid-70s. Doesn't look the part really, does he? But anyway, we see this observation free text, which I've called it, and what's happening is during the scene, Mr. Smart's character is asking each of the visitors in the house if they would like tea or coffee, and who wants sugar, who wants milk, etc. But what we see is him walking backwards and forwards from the kitchen, forgetting each time and asking a number of times. But this observation then is now thrown over as the scene is going on, is open as a text question, free text question to an audience, asking them what are they observing, what do they see happening at the moment. And again, the responses we had from that was everything from memory problems to Alzheimer's to dementia to etc. So that was really useful as well. Again, we then had the scene later on in the scene where the daughter, actually Dot in this case, gives a dilemma. She has been offered a job in America, which would launchpad her career, but of course she's pulled by the want and need to stay in the country to look after her ailing parents. So the question really to the audience was, if you were in Dot's shoes, would you stay or would you go? And that was the kind of values-based, dilemma-based question that we gave the audience. Certainly, on that particular occasion, 75% of the audience would go to America and leave the parents behind. But again, it was really interesting because it allowed us to have that conversation with the audience. Scene 3 was more of a straight sort of theatre production at that particular point. But scene 4 was where we had a healthcare professional undertaking a mini mental state examination, so a memory test on Mr. Smart with Mrs. Smart present. And again, originally the healthcare worker didn't do a very good job. We deliberately set that scene up to sort of mimic that, of all the flaws that could be contained during an assessment. What then happened was we gave a free text question to the audience, gave them about 5 minutes to make suggestions about how the healthcare worker could have done it differently. Whilst that was happening, the actor was scanning all of the answers that were coming in and was able to select the ones that she thought was most appropriate, and then we reran the scene once again with the audience's suggestions. So again, it hopefully gives a flavour of the sort of moulding together of Me Too question types with the live action that students could both observe and comment on. Can I have the next slide, please, Dermott? So, as with always these sorts of things, it's just the what went well, what didn't go so well, and what have we learnt. So what went well? Well, for sure, I mean, so having something as dynamic and visual and emotional, as it were, as theatre in the room always goes down well with our students. But certainly the 350 feel like they have a voice. And so therefore it's versatile and engaging. I've got to say, it was one of our first attempts at doing it, but it blended seamlessly with our interactive theatre methods. And interestingly, and just looking over to the message board as well, we can see that issues of the message board itself, was that a problem? Well, certainly what started to happen was this was the what didn't go so well part. We had a large audience of 350 I've mentioned before, and these were the first time users of Me Too. So there's something there about a large number and also first time users, because it's like getting a toy for the first time. We also added in the anonymous comments. So the potential was there, and certainly it occurred during the session where you got all sorts of playful, if I could be diplomatic, comments. And there's a higher chance of silly comments coming in. But I'm going to go back to what went well, and actually the self-policing element of the students was really good as well. Finally, what have we learned doing this? Well, certainly one of the things about tighter management of the message board. Sometimes we can just switch it off altogether, but certainly as a facilitator, and it was me that was facilitating on the day, there's a lot to juggle between message board, audience engagement, actor management, and that sort of thing. And so tighter facilitation and that juggling action of the questions and message board is certainly something that we've learned. So with timing, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Trevor, and next slide please, Dermott. Thank you.
I think we've got a question actually to start off with. What we're asking you is, have you used student response systems with other conference technologies such as Skype, Adobe Connect, Google Hangouts, GoToMeetings, etc.? And I'm not talking about PowerPoint, by the way. Clearly we all use it with PowerPoint as well. So if people could answer this, it would be quite useful to find out. I'll leave it for you to Dermott to press the buttons when you want to. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so we've got a third of people, almost a third of comfortable, but got a number of people in the group that aren't, and making me nervous. That's interesting, 20%. So if we go to the next slide, please, Dermott. Time is right. Okay. Yeah, if you can put all the text up, that'll be fine. So just very briefly, one of my roles is to introduce the patient experience into our healthcare programs, and I do a lot of getting patients to talk to students about their experience as a patient and their experience of living with a long-term health condition, and what they feel, the skills they look for in different professions. And one of the things that I find is that I use Skype, and the advantages of using Skype is that we can bring people into the live classroom that I wouldn't be able to previously. So that has been a problem in the past. Some people live too far away, some people have disabilities in which they cannot come into the lecture room. So I started to use Skype, but we had an additional problem in the sense that doing a Q&A to patients on Skype was a bit more problematic. I've had colleagues running around the lecture room with microphones, and it doesn't work very well. So when we started to use Me Too frequently, I thought of using Me Too within this environment, because we all should recognize now that you don't need to be in the same room to use the app, clearly not. So what we do is we Skype the patient into the classroom, and on our big hall lecture rooms, it's actually quite impactful having a person come in on Skype in a big cinema type screen. So at their home location, they're using their PC or laptop or whatever to do the Skype, but they've also got a phone or a tablet running the Me Too app, and they've joined the meeting too. So the way we tend to run these things is that it's a kind of interview approach where myself and the patient will agree the questions that I'm going to ask them beforehand. So as we have the chat, we put out questions to the audience, to the student group, and they send in their text responses, and the patient at their home address or wherever they're Skyping from can view immediately the questions being posed. I tend to control the session using the dashboard and tend to put it in order of most liked. That way the patient can choose the questions they want to answer. Clearly with an audience of several hundred, you can't answer all the questions and comments that come in, but we keep it to the most popular on the day, and then afterwards the patient can then review all the comments that come in and provide a slightly more a detailed answer on a text-based a Word or something, which we can distribute to the students afterwards. So there are several issues there, and one of the situations that I've done this with a patient, we've put on the Me Too website as a case study, and you can see the address there, and it's worth having a look at because we go into a lot more detail about how we constructed the session together and produced it, and it's more detail about the issues there. So if we just have the next slide, please.
We put the full case study up onto the message board as well.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. So what went well? Well, clearly this is it's quite versatile. It tends to be able to bring people. It gives the patient voice really. Using technology such as Skype with Me Too, I think it's a seamless blend of technology really, because you can't actually see them using the app at all, but they can refer to it constantly as they see the questions come in, and I can manage what questions they're seeing. If anyone, as James has alluded to, sometimes you get nice tie, Trevor, and this kind of thing coming through, which we can manage because I'm concentrating on managing the technology, and the patient is interacting with the student audience. So that seems to work really quite well. What didn't go so well? Well, sometimes you're relying on a person's home broadband signal, and in the UK, the broadband signal can be a little bit variable, although it's getting faster. Occasionally we've had one or two hitches with that, but I don't think we've had enough to warrant not using the system. For me, it's been say occasional few issues, but it's been okay. I think you have to manage numbers, and I've just come from a big Me Too session I've been running with about 250 students, and what we tend to do now is get them into groups of 2s and 3s, to one group at a time put a comment in, and that slows the traffic down because it can get quite overwhelming. What have we learned? Well, I think we've learned that we can make this, the more we think about how we use Me Too creatively, you can start to overcome some of these other issues that appear. Now, I'm using this system because it's about patient ability to come into a classroom, but there's no reason why this can't be used for any expert anywhere in the world. We've actually done a Skype live in Southampton here to Tokyo, where there's an academic that does a session for us, And I think it's about having the confidence to use technology such as Skype. And he's at Tokyo University and we're in Southampton. So the broadband signals are fantastic and there's no lag. And I think people can become more confident in using technology such as Skype. When you combine it with Me Too, you get a very powerful learning tool, I think, that engages the audience. And one of the things I'm forever amazed about with Me Too particularly is the amount of student interaction that you get. That if you look around the room, they're all joining in, and that's terrific, because we know that student engagement in a big hall lecture can be challenging at times. And using technology such as Me Too, I think the interaction levels go really high. I think that's about, I think I've overstayed my welcome there, but I think that's all I've got to say.
Never, never.
I think, Dermott, are you there? We can't see you.
I sure am.
Yeah, right. Happy to take questions.
I shall pop back so you can see. Okay. Thank you very much for that. That was really brilliant, and I certainly learned a few things there as well, which is really great to hear. We've got a few really good questions here, so if we just pop through them, hopefully people will submit a few more as we go. So the first one, which was the first question that came in, is from Bob Morris, a really good question here. So do you think that you can run immersive interactive sessions single-handed with Me Too? It's hard to manage the dashboard and run the session. Now I know you spoke to that really briefly, but are there any key little tips that you can give of a way to actually manage both of those at the same time?
Well, the use of something like a tablet, I think with an interactive theatre session, the facilitator, or joker actually as they're called, is a kind of mobile role. You don't want to be pinned behind a podium. So the use of a tablet, such as an iPad, would be ideal actually, because as the comments are coming in to the facilitator, the actors can't see them, but the facilitator can see them as they come in, so they can use those guidance notes to steer the actors. Clearly there's an issue with the number of audience and the amount of comments coming in. And so I think that's an issue that's ongoing, and I think the bigger the audience, the bigger the little groups you have to get them to form. So there's only one comment coming in per 3 or 4 students.
Yeah,
you agree?
And I think as well, I mean, there's the professional ground rules as well. Some people will obviously have a little bit of playfulness about them, and I think there's a certain level of that which can lighten a session. I think the difficulty comes when it becomes possibly more abusive, which I'm pleased to say we haven't had any of that in our classrooms, but you're always worried, I think, at the back of your mind that potential is there.
And of course you can wipe them away with an iPad touchscreen. You can swipe them away into the hidden section anyway, which I think is quite good.
Yeah.
There's a multitasking going on here. There's no doubt about it.
Cool,
Sorry,
thanks.
Yeah. No.
So one from Dave Palmer about the messaging. I think you've already responded to that one. So thanks very much. Rebecca Evans has a good question here. So do you find high engagement rates when using this method with such a large audience of students, and what's the student feedback on this approach? Now, again, I think you touched on some of that, but is there any more detail you can go into in terms of the difference in the engagement rates, perhaps?
I can start with this one and say that the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. One comment which immediately popped straight to my mind was it was about a student who highlighted herself as someone who wouldn't put her hand up in a class, because usually in large hall lectures there's always about 4 or 5 who can, if you allow them to monopolise and silence a lot of other people for a variety of reasons. But her comment really validated the use of Me Too, because it said it allows the quiet ones to speak.
And that's really the anonymous feature. I think if you were going to do Me Too with 25 in a group and they all knew each other, you could probably go for the signing in process. A bit like today actually, where people are signing in with their names. But I think in the student group, it releases actually how they really do feel about things if it's anonymous, and that's a very powerful tool. As is the like feature as well, which we found the students really do like the like feature.
Yeah. We had we certainly had the students that started to self-police you know, if the message board started to get a little bit silly, then actually we had self-policing going on. So it didn't require us to sort of step in or shout warnings to everybody. Actually, the like button, you know, was evident. So when someone came in and said, no, that's rubbish, bang, 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 like came in quite a lot. So it was really quite nice.
Good stuff. Tom's got a good question here, and I'd be very keen to get this as well if you've got one, but a checklist or a kind of script for preparation around these Skype and Me Too sessions. Do you have anything written down?
Well, a checklist. I mean, I tend in a big hall lecture to make sure our AV guys set the equipment up just to make sure, even though I'm happy to use Skype on my own with my own PC, when it comes to big halls, I think you need to get the technicals right. I would, when I tend to Skype several days before the person I'm doing it with, so we can jointly build up what we're going to do. If we're going to do an interview style, which I refer to Radio 4 here, but that's a bit of a UK thing. But interview style, we prepare together the questions that I'm going to ask the person. So it's very much built up. I'm not going to say rehearse because none of this is scripted, but we know pretty well where the session is going to go. I explain the technology, the Me Too technology. We do a dry run of the Me Too as well with the person. So I think for me, the use of technology in any teaching, you need to rehearse. You need to make sure the system is robust and it's working. A bit like we did with this session last Friday. We've gone through with one of your colleagues and we're happy with the technology will work. So I think for me, technology needs a bit of prep time to make sure it's working smoothly. And then you can be much more confident that it's going to work on the day.
And I think that's been an issue certainly. For example, if you go to an area with low Wi-Fi signal, for example, hotels, if they have conferences, these are always areas where it's always worthwhile finding out beforehand what the strength is like.
And funny enough, the guy, the academic in Tokyo, he was actually on holiday when he did the last one in the summer, we've just gone, and he was in a hotel and I was really starting to panic, but apparently Wi-Fi in Japanese hotels are second to none, so we had no problems at all.
I can recommend Japan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the tip, to go to Japan.
Yes, exactly.
Just two more. I'm aware of the time here, but if we just get through two more questions here. So another one from Bob. Does the novelty of interactive theatre wear off with multiple student exposures?
I mean, certainly it's not the panacea, and I think that's the message as well. It's not going to supplant, and I think a careful use of any form of interactive theatre is key, because again, it's what points you're wanting to get across to your audience. But it's not been our experience so far. Like I mentioned at the start, we've been doing it since 2004. And students keep coming back for more, which is really nice, and I think it's because it's they're live topics which are relevant to the student audience, and they've got something they want to say on it.
The same applies to the use of Me Too. You have to do it with a purpose.
Yeah.
Any technology has to be used for a purpose, not because it's cool or whatever, because the students, no matter what system you're going to use, you're going to easily bored. So you have to understand why you're using it, and why you're going to use multiple choice questions, for example, or you're going to use text-based questions, or you're going to do a combination of both. You have to work out a strategy for your session, whatever technology, stroke, theatre, or any other approach you use, because there's no point in using it just because it's there.
In fact, there's a danger that you can, if it's not thought through properly, then actually the brand, if say Me Too is just used willy-nilly in every single session, then potentially, yeah, it could hurt the brand. I know that as a previous example, we had the clickers here for many years, and one of our colleagues used the clickers, and from that day onwards, students were turned off by them because they were used inappropriately and in such a poor way. And as I said, novelty will last so long, but I think certainly a careful, thought through teaching and learning experience that you want to get across to your audience is key to blend any form of methods such as Skype or interactive theatre or any other method that you choose to use.
Lovely, thanks. And then the very last thing, Adam's asked, are you going to be submitting the case study to an academic journal?
Yeah, I have already. Nurse Education Today looked at a clickers theatre approach, so that one's there. I could probably put up a link afterwards discussing that, because it breaks down how to put together a clickers theatre, as I've affectionately called it.
And I'm going to hopefully write up an article with the lady that I did the case study with you with, actually, that's logged on your website. Yes, I'm hoping to get that written up as a published paper.
Oh, brilliant. And those links have already been pushed out to me too, and we will of course share them afterwards as well. I think our questions have dried up for now, but we'll leave the message board open, so if anybody thinks of anything else, please put it in, and we commit to getting you some responses back afterwards on that. So just before we wrap up, I'd like to go through a couple of bits here. So we have a series of other webinars coming up that you might be interested in signing up for. So the first one, which is coming soon, is Running Q&A the Me Too Way, and then about unleashing the power of the Me Too report. So just to give you all some help using Me Too. And I've posted out the link to our webinars page to register there. And then last of all from me, I'd really like to get some feedback on the webinar. So we should be sharing our blushes on this one, but please give us your honest feedback on these. It's the only way that we can improve all our webinars. I, for one, think this has been brilliant. So thank you both very much for jumping on and presenting to us all today. But I will take those results there. And yep, spare mine, and that's it. So thank you both very much, James and Trevor, for joining us today and presenting, and thank you all to our participants for joining in today's session. So we hope to see you on the next one. Thanks very much.
Thank you for taking time out of your day, folks. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.